Last time on D&D, featuring Adrian Silverstrength, the human paladin, Morsus Firebeard, the hill dwarf cleric, Ragnarok, the Asmir warlock, Sophrenia, the high elf cleric, and Don Kanan, the half elf ranger. After resting at the base of the mountain and keeping guard, the party spots what appears to be the same manticores that had attacked them previously and had fled after being wounded. These manticores looked to have hunted other animals in the fields throughout the night, choosing to ignore the party. Having fully rested, the party makes their way up the mountain trail, heading up for the Gates of Thoradin, the Dwarven Kingdom. Now, if you know me, I love Dragonlance, and the fact that Don Kanan, who plays the half-elf ranger in this game, is a huge fan of Dragonlance, I did this as a little nod to him. If you know Dragonlance, you know kind of what Gates of Thoradin kind of sounds like in terms of a Dwarven Kingdom. Anyway, as they make their way up the stone path, they spot 3 large birds whose wingspans are about 6 feet in length. None of them are able to immediately tell what kind of birds they are. They failed their perception and nature checks to try to identify these unusual looking birds. Don Kanan and Sophrenia both try to stealth forward, but Sophrenia's armor makes a little bit too much noise, so she stops and allows Don Kanan to basically stealth the rest of the way on his own. As he gets up further ahead, he can see that these birds are very, very unusual in nature. They appear to have antlers like deers, and what they seem to be attacking are dwarves who are in this wagon that has been viciously attacked. And they're picking up these dwarves and throwing them off the ravine, and when the dwarves tumble to their death, these birds basically go down and rip them apart. He ends up turning around and returning to the party to describe what he has just seen. The party decides to go up the mountain trail, basically keeping their back to the wall, with Adrian, Morsus, and Sophrenia pretty much in the front. Don, Kanan, and Ragnarok are in the back. Don and Sophrenia fire arrows at the same giant bird, which draws its attention, and also lets out a scream to draw the attention of the other birds. The ghastly sight of these unusual birds that now, facing them, have deer-like heads and antlers. It's not just the antlers, and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. And this temporarily startles Adrian. The reason that is what I do as a rule in my game is if you roll a natural 20 during initiative, you basically get 2 actions. You get what your normal action is, and you can do another action. So this also includes that you can cast 2 spells on your turn. And I explain this as adrenaline. So for example, if Adrian was to roll a natural 20 on initiative, he could do his normal attacks and then get another series of his normal attacks. And so if Sophrenia, who is a cleric, had got a natural 20, she could cast a spell and then cast another spell. And this is, again, all because of rolling a natural 20. On the flip side, if you roll a natural 1, it doesn't matter what your initiative bonus is, it is always a critical fail, and that usually results in losing a turn. So rather than getting 2 turns for a natural 20, you actually lose a turn. And it's only that first round, because it's usually explained as you're stunned. As you're drawing your arrows from a bow, you drop the arrows, so your turn is basically spent picking up the arrows. Whatever the case might be, a natural 1 is always pretty much you're failing. So Adrian, on initiative, had rolled a natural 1, so he is temporarily just stunned for that round as he sees these ghastly-looking creatures. The 3 birds see that Adrian has dropped his weapon and shield and decide to target him. I usually just basically roll to see who the birds will attack, so it's not me targeting someone. I usually leave that up to the dice to determine who these creatures will go for. One of them slams into him, knocking him against the stone wall and doing considerable damage. Don and Ragnarok deal a majority of the damage, eventually killing all 3 of these unusual birds. Don Kanan, though he does not know what these birds are called, has heard from other dwarves that he's traveled around as a ranger, and heard that these birds essentially have been around Thoradin's entrance far more frequently, and they tend to require feasting on a beating heart, which explains why they're disposing of the dwarves off the ledge and then going down and feeding on them after quickly killing them. The party then makes their way up to the wagon that these dwarves had been in, which is in shambles, and quickly scans the wagon. They find 2 dead dwarves who were not thrown off the ravine by these strange birds and decide to bury them. Don Kanan takes note that the strange birds did not kill these dwarves, something else did. Because upon looking at them, he notices that there are arrow marks in the chest of these dwarves. So something shot and killed these dwarves as they were taking their wagon down the path. Adrian wonders if it's the same type of arrow that he found in the dwarf in the field just before. Sophrenia notes that the odd arrows that had killed these 2 dwarves looks exactly like the arrow they found in the other dwarf. It is made from a very unique form of black wood that none of them are familiar with. And Sophrenia realizes that the person who sent them up here has the surname of Black Oak. So she understands that there is some kind of connection. And for this, Sophrenia gets inspiration. After burying the 2 dwarves who were driving the wagon, Adrian, Don, and Morsus all essentially do a prayer for these slain dwarves. The party then goes back to the wagon and kind of starts sorting through the crates to see what's in these crates. And they notice that there's weapons and shields bearing the symbol of Black Oak, which is the same thing from the dwarf who sent them up here. And the party proceeds up the mountain. They stop at a rest stop that was forged by the dwarves. You can see that it has all these dwarven ruins around it. It's a very nice area. It's got these trees. There is water that is running out from the mountain. There's an area for the caravans to normally stop. Adrian notices that the other trees bear fruit and gathers some of them to eat it. Immediately, he feels a very dire effect of poison, basically sapping his strength. He finds a way to cleanse it by using lay on hands. Morsus tries to purify the fruit, notices that the poison is less effective, but still present in the fruit. The party proceeds up the path and reaches the gates of Thoradin. Morsus tries to open the door, but can't seem to figure out how the lock works. It is Sophrenia who has, despite her dislike of being in closed spaces, being an elf, she has studied much about the different cultures throughout the world, being an elf, and she realizes how to open the door, and she is able to open the door. Lighting a torch for Adrian due to his inability of having dark vision since he is human, the party ventures inside, all holding torches and waving them about, and is immediately greeted by the smell of decay. As they look around, they see a number of dwarves in various states of decay. These dwarves look like they've been fighting here, and a war has been fighting in these hallways. However, who they fought is not evident. There is no evidence of who the enemy was, unless the dwarves were fighting amongst each other. Searching through the corpses, they do find several of the dwarves have this same similar black shaft arrow of this unique wood that none of them are familiar with. Morsus kind of looks around as well, and he spots that some of them appear to have been poisoned, which is unusual, considering a dwarf's resistance to poison. He discovers that the poison acts not only with the blood that causes immediate weakness, which is what Adrian had experienced when he ate the fruit, but it also wears down the person's constitution and begins to devour the flesh almost like a parasite. This explains why several of the dwarves are in different states of decay. Some of them look to have been poisoned by this unique poison that they found. So now they have a unique type of arrow, wooden arrow, that they've not seen before. And now there's unusually strong poison that is strong enough to apparently kill these hard dwarves. The party hears, much to their surprise, someone moaning and goes to check, and they meet a dwarf by the name of Rex Flamehammer, who is saved by Adrian's quick thinking. The party notices that he's standing over the body of a female. An elf, by the looks of it. Sophrenia recognizes the woman as a dark elf. In my world, the drow are called dark elves because they live in shadow. So it's essentially a drow, or drow, however you want to pronounce it, but in my world they're typically just called the dark elves. She knows the history of the dark elves according to the lore, and when the world was being created, the elves entered the world. The high elves, such as yourselves, were the first elves, and when they came into the world, they took over force, but they did not like the world outside, so they built stone walls and these magnificent palaces made of stone and wood. A branch of these elves believe that this is a defile, they shouldn't lock themselves away behind walls. All of the woods should be their home. This is where the wild elves or the wood elves came from. And yet another sense of elves defected as well. These were born with wild magic, and they believe that their magic that they were born with as elves to have this power should be used. And they should basically take over the world. They were the first according to elves, they are the first children of the gods, and that as the first children, they should oversee everyone. However, both the high elves and the wood elves disagreed with this, that, nature should be just nature. So these elves were actually chased away, and they ventured deep into the mountains for thousands of years, where they began learning magic and twisting it, and their skin also changed to adapt to survive in shadow, because a fair-skinned, fair-haired person in darkness would not fare well against the number of creatures that lived beneath these mountains. So their skin and their hair also changed to kind of match that surrounding around them, but also perhaps match the blackness of their souls, because these dark elves, they rejected Nifika, who is the goddess of magic and elves, and they found another goddess, a dark goddess called the Spider Queen. So if you know standard D&D, the Drow worship a spider goddess called Loth. In my world, it's very similar. Rex Flamehammer goes on to explain that the Dark Elves have started a civil war among the dwarves. He believes that they have begun poisoning the water supply and crafting arrows from black oak trees grown exclusively down in this area known as the Shadowlands. And these trees are property of the Black Oak clan, Thoris Black Oak's family, who had originally sent them here, and had begun murdering dwarves to make it look like the Black Oak clan was responsible using these arrows. He believes that the Dark Elves' ultimate goal is to cause civil war between the dwarves and cause the infighting to weaken them so that they can overthrow the Dwarven King, who is King Theriak Froststorm. If they can do that, the Dark Elves pretty much will eliminate most of their enemies here, and the only enemies that would remain are the Illithid, or the Mind Flayers. The Dark Elves were actually able to get close enough to King Theriak because they explain that the water poisoning is not coming from them, it's coming from the Illithid. So now King Theriak is seeing a civil war brewing between his family. He believes the Black Oaks are trying to overthrow him, but he also believes that the Dark Elves are here to say, hey, we want to help you as well as us, because our water supply is poisoned as well, against the Illithid, which further fractures the king's attention. So now he's dealing with a civil war, and he's also dealing potentially with some Illithid. The king, in an effort to stop this civil war, demands that the Black Oak clan surrender themselves because they are being held responsible for these attacks on other dwarves. But the Black Oak clan refuses, saying that they are completely innocent and they're not behind these attacks. But the king explains that, as far as they know, this type of tree that is being found in these dwarves who have been slain only grows in the area where the Black Oak clan rules. And now the king immediately begins sending out forces to arrest anyone who is a Black Oak sympathizer. So this is causing further unrest, because now people who may know the Black Oak are being accused, and they may not even be involved in any of this. So the dwarven town is in a state of unrest as the king is trying to figure out what to do. Despite this, neither the Black Oaks nor Flamehammer want the king killed. They believe the Dark Elves are behind all of this, and that madness somehow has gripped the king, because the king is acting very, very unusual. Like him accusing the Black Oaks, him believing the Illithid are behind it, and him believing the Dark Elves. All of this comes from a state of paranoia that they have never seen the king experience, and the king has sat on the throne for many, many years. Rex Flamehammer explains that the reason that there are no Dark Elves around is because after they attack, they tend to make sure that they carry away their dead and dying, so that when dwarves stumble upon this scene, they just see dead dwarves everywhere. Rex also explains that there is a Dark Elf emissary who now sits at the side of the king, trying to basically formulate a plan to stop the civil unrest, as well as find a plan to attack the Illithid. Adrian goes on to explain the wagon that they found outside of the gates, and explains how someone apparently assassinated the dwarves who were driving this wagon, and that this wagon was headed here to perhaps provide weapons and shield in this battle. And Rex explains that, for now, it'd probably be best to avoid the dwarves, because they are very nervous and very tense, and outsiders assisting on either side of this could raise further tension. Morsus then asks about, hey, how can we go about cleaning the water supply? this is the original reason we were sent up here by the Black Oak, and we just want to do that, help our part, and get out if that's what needs to happen. The king thinks anyone who assists the Black Oak is essentially against the king, and anyone who helps the king, the Black Oaks will think that, they're against them. So now both sides are very, very difficult, and they've not found out who is truly poisoning the water supply. Is it the Illithid? Is it the Dark Elves? Or is it something else? So the party agrees that they'll come and hang out and try to stay out of this civil war that's brewing, and they'll just try to clean the water supply so that essentially food and famine and disease will come to an end here inside the Dwarven Kingdom, because that is also increasing the tension, because food is now being poisoned by the water supply, so everyone is getting sick. Those who don't eat are basically sickly. This is leading to theft of old resources before the poison came along. So the Dwarven Kingdom is in a state of unrest. And now the adventurers find themselves almost caught in the middle and not sure what to do.